I think we're going to get started on our webinar, and as everyone joins, thank you very much for joining us. We're very pleased to introduce Joel Lacrosseur today from Paradigm Paralegal.
Good morning.
Joel was referred to me through a commercial client, and we've enjoyed a great relationship. Joel has been referred to many of our personal lines clients, as well as our commercial clients on fighting tickets very successfully, and we've had extremely positive feedback from anyone who is engaged in the services of Joel. So it's quite the pleasure. And
thank you for the big shoes to fill here. I appreciate the invite, and thank you for joining us, folks. I look forward to reading today's topics.
Well, we have many commercial clients, particularly in transportation, as well personal lines. So we welcome any questions that you may have. We're going to try to tackle them as we go along, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So as I said, Joel's with Paradigm, and we feel that it's important to share education with our clients, and as well, we encourage you to network to others as well. So knowledge is power. As an insurance broker, we like to bring the value to our prospects, our customers, and anyone that has children or drives a car can engage the services of Joel if you have a ticket. And the reasons to fight the ticket, we're going to now introduce Joel, and away we go.
Good morning, folks. My name is Joel Lacrosseur, and I am the owner-operator paralegal of Paradigm Ticket Defense. I've been in business for approximately 4 years now, the previous year at a different place, learning the craft, I guess, so to speak, as there are many mechanisms in order to fight tickets. I was a police officer for over 10 years in Windsor, Ontario, as well as Orangeville, Ontario. I do a lot of experience with the court system, a lot of experience with tickets, and most scenarios that are passed my way on a weekly basis are very reminiscent of other cases I've dealt with over my course of my career. So if you do have any questions at any point, feel free to interject. At the end of this, we will put up our contact information if there's any questions at any point. I pretty much do work 7 days a week, and it's free to speak to me, which is kind of a nice option as well. So.
And I have exercised that option of trying to get Joel after hours and weekends.
Successfully, I hope.
Definitely.
For the most part, anyway.
And he has been very responsive to emails. And just look, at one point in time, Joel handed out the tickets, so who better?
I was good to deal with, but I still did write tickets on the
Oh, okay. So I guess our first point is talking about, we're going to capitalize on demerit points, CVOR, and what to do when you do get a ticket. So demerit points.
Yes, demerit points are what
I know nothing about this.
Well, by the time I'm done here, my hope and goal is that you'll know a substantial amount. And if you don't know something, like I said earlier, please feel free to ask, because accessibility is everything. And most moving violations that people who drive in Ontario receive are going to have demerit points associated to them. There's a whole range of them that could be a simple standalone speeding ticket to something accident related, or the flavor of the day has been handheld device. And I'm sure people are going to have questions about that, because the law is changing rapidly to reflect the issues that handheld devices have posed from both an insurance standpoint. I'm sure Linda's well aware of that, and from a policing standpoint. And we will get into that a little bit more in depth, a little bit further in the broadcast. What we're going to speak about in terms of demerit points are how they have the potential to negatively affect your license. And demerit points are something that you start at zero and you collect them. You don't lose points. A lot of times the misconception is that people have the mindset that you lose demerit points. No, they're not there to lose, they're there to gain. You start at zero, and when you start getting up into the 6 to 8 range, you can expect a letter from the MTO. Once a letter from the MTO comes to you, it's basically their way of putting you on notice that you better get your act together, because you're not far from being suspended. And once you're a suspended license, then that's a whole other litany of issues that have to be dealt with and separate. But you collect them via moving violations, and when you do receive a ticket, we do have options, of course, and what you do with your options and how you exercise them is entirely up to you. But it's never a bad idea to speak to a legal practitioner, either a paralegal or a lawyer, and at least get a full scope of what your options are, because they're limitless, really. I mean, there's three main options, but within those options, there's a lot of different factors and variables that can come into play, and how you can make the situation far better than it currently is when you first receive the ticket. So,
And I'll present the first question.
please do.
If you get an infraction, does it vary from court to court? So if I had an infraction in Windsor, is it possible that it could be affected differently in, let's say, Newmarket, Thunder Bay?
Absolutely. On the back of each ticket, you have three options, generally speaking. The option one is one that I never opt to exercise, which is to simply pay the ticket. If you want to pay the ticket, you can. But as soon as you pay it, you're settling yourself with whatever demerit points are involved. You've agreed to the facts on the face of the tickets. They're substantially correct. And the conviction is going to be on there for a 2-year period. Demerit points negatively affect your license and potentially affect your license for 2 full years. So even if you are guilty of the offense, and most people, if they're not guilty, they feel they're guilty of something. Perhaps it's not the offense that was written for them. But if you can drag it out substantially in the court system and then pay it at a later date, then you're only going to have those points affecting your license for whatever time has elapsed, backdated to the date of the offense. So if you can drag it out successfully for 1 year, and let's just arbitrarily say it's a red light ticket and it carries 3 demerit points, then at least it's only going to affect your point system demerit points for 1 more year, because you've successfully dragged it out.
I've never had a ticket, so.
It is nice to be
no,
sitting next to such a good driver.
No, I hired you. Yeah.
or decent legal, I guess.
But we do have a question. Steve Fleming, what about points received while driving in the USA? Good question.
There are states that do have reciprocal agreements with Ontario. Michigan, I know, is one for certain, because I was a Windsor police officer, and it wasn't uncommon to see a Windsor driver, an Ontario driver, that had a Michigan conviction and the points transferred over. Now, even though it's like that in theory at the administrative transportation level, it doesn't always transpire that way. Multiple times, drivers would tell me that they just paid a ticket in Michigan or Ohio, and it did not show up on their Ontario abstract, despite the fact that in theory the law stated it should. But absolutely, it's worth at least speaking to somebody who do get at a province or a state ticket to see if it is a reciprocal agreement in place, and then we can look at dealing with it accordingly. I'm only licensed to practice in Ontario, but I do have a network in place of other states and other provinces, etc., to deal with things accordingly as they come up.
So the answer to that is call Joel.
It is. It never hurts. And if it's a free call, it's a free call. It doesn't hurt.
Thank you for asking the question, Steve. Okay, so we're going to move on with dealing with demerit and CVOR points at each step.
Okay, on the back of each ticket, and each court will vary. There's quite a variance from Windsor to Sudbury. Every court has got its own criteria and its own options. Option one across the province will be to pay the ticket. Occasionally, courts will have early resolution, and early resolution is an opportunity to meet with the prosecutor, discuss how the ticket came about, potentially resolve it to something that the prosecutor and yourself agree on. And then there's option 3, which is to take it to trial. Now, just because something is set for trial, it doesn't mean it's actually going to make it to the trial screen. But on the back of each ticket, each court specifically, there will be 3 options that are quite clear on the back. You do have 15 days across the province to make a decision on one of those 3 steps, and how you deal with that is entirely up to you. It's always a good idea to get some legal advice at some point, unless it's a minimal offense, or you feel it's a minimal offense, like a license plate sticker being out, or your ownership not being signed, etc. But it's good to get a professional opinion on it, just to see what can be done, and to see if, at the very least, to see if the fine can be reduced for you.
Okay, so just another question here. When you're saying that to fight the ticket, and I guess for some it may feel a little bit intimidating that you have to go to court. So is it so hiring you would actually take it over and you deal with the court process?
Correct. From each step of the way. Once my services are retained, it basically becomes my problem, start to finish. I'm responsible for the filing. I'm responsible for dealing with the court date, obtaining the court date. Only once the court date is obtained can evidence be ordered. And at the end of the day, you're being accused of something that can range from obstructed license plate to a very high speeding ticket. The court has got a very high threshold in which to prove the case against you. At this level of court, it is quasi-criminal, and quasi-criminal means it's not far off from the stream of criminal charges, and the prosecutor or the Crown Attorney, depending what type of a ticket or summons you have, has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that is a very high threshold. So at very least, you want, once the trial date's been applied for, you want somebody with a level of expertise to go through the evidence and show that, yes, you know what, now we can conclusively say that they do have sufficient evidence to likely garner a conviction on this if we did run a trial. So then it kicks us into the secondary mode, which is relying on my relationship with the prosecutor and seeing what sort of mitigating we can do and what sort of resolution that we can all live with. But the final sign-off is always going to be with the client. At no point is anything ever done without the client's blessing. And they're very involved from step one right through to the end. However, the onus is for me to deal with it from start to finish and to make some decisions based on what's in the client's best interest. So
another question I'm going to pose here is, if there's severity of the ticket, so a speeding, let's say in court, as opposed to someone with a careless, the severity, should I be as concerned with the speeding, or how do the courts interpret the careless? Would they reduce the careless to another charge? Is that a potential?
It's a potential, and generally speaking, there's two streams of which an officer can both investigate and issue a ticket for. Part one is a ticket which has got a price on it, and it's issued to you at the side of the road, and it's issued to you at the time of the vehicle stop. So if it's a speeding, let's just say it's 29 over, and it comes with a $130 fine, you have the option of either paying it. Generally speaking, an officer will tell you it does have demerit points, but don't rely on what the officer tells you, because I've been front and center when officers are giving information that's incorrect. But if it's a more serious charge, because there are charges in the Highway Traffic Act that can have accompanying jail time. Stunt racing is one of them. Careless driving under certain circumstances can certainly have jail time associated with it. Drive under suspension undoubtedly has people that routinely get 30 days jail time. So in order to assure that everything goes proper, it's good to have a bit of intervention, because there is no, legal aid is not an option at this level of court. So to get somebody's professional advice on it would be a wise thing, because there definitely are, potential for serious penalties in certain charges.
Now, I know as far as some of the driving abstracts that we have seen, it has implications as far as the carrier. If you're talking personal insurance, it could affect the insurance. So when you're looking at a multitude of tickets, like let's say if there was a couple speeding, and now I suddenly have a passing on the side of the shoulder or the side of the highway, should I be fighting that ticket? Because it's now going to be three. I can speak to the insurance terminology after, but the severity of that plus the previous speeding, when you go to court, how does that look when you're coming to the prosecutor and saying, here we are, we have two speeding, and now we have a passing on the side of.
It's quite
does
common.
It have an impact?
It definitely has an impact, and to be quite honest, if an officer's decided to write between 2 and 4 tickets, usually a couple of them are just for the sake of garnering a conviction on some of the 2 of the more serious ones. What they really want are the charges that are the moving violation. But there's several hundred charges that are available to an officer under the Highway Traffic Act and some of the accompanying Ontario regulations. There's many charges available. Occasionally, we're going to get an officer that's a bit overzealous. I had one case last year where the officer wrote 16 tickets, which is exceptional. I've never had one prior or since like that. And 10 of them were for the company, and the remainder were for the driver specific. Obviously, the officer was making a plea resolution at some point down the road, but generally speaking, we're going to tackle the most serious tickets with with our best foot forward to ensure that they have the least impact on the person's driving. As you know, you typically don't want 3 convictions in a 3-year period, and most of the time we can resolve these things to everybody's liking and avoid valuable court time.
So I guess at the end of the day, you having to defend something and they take in the prior history as well into consideration on what the
They
end
do.
result's going to be.
They do, and a lot of times officers are emotionally charged at the time of an event and they write a lot of tickets. With that particular incident, it was 16 tickets. In the end, it was down to 1 ticket. So it worked out quite favorably for everybody, but it looked a lot worse at the onset than it appeared to be. And it was resolved accordingly.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, for sure. Thought so too.
Okay. Okay, so when we get into a paralegal or a lawyer, why would we hire a paralegal if I have, let's say, a speeding ticket? I think it's a little bit overkill for a lawyer to become involved, but tell me your opinion on that.
Well, there are some lawyers that do defend people for HTA, and a lot of times, I think the key is for the person that's hiring somebody to defend in court is to have faith in who you're dealing with. And it's an interview for you. If you go to 2 or 3 places, get 2 or 3 quotes, first off, is it a flat fee to represent me? Or am I going to have to worry about ongoing charges? I've only ever dealt on the premise of a flat fee because I can tell you by hearing your side of the story and seeing the tickets in front of us or the summons in front of us, what I can expect of this case and how it's likely going to resolve itself. And I know how many hours I have to put into it, and I give you what's called a flat fee, so you don't have to worry about if I've gone to court several times, if it goes a little bit longer, do I have to worry about further incurred fees? No, it's a flat fee, it's agreed upon, it's signed off on, so we know exactly where we're at. Generally speaking, for highway traffic theft matters, you'll be dealing with paralegals. And I think it's always best that you interview who you're dealing with and come to the conclusion, is this person likely to represent my best interests? Do they know what they're speaking of? Are they well presented? Are they well spoken? Do they have knowledge of the court system? And have they answered the questions that I have for them? And when we walk out of the office, do I have faith in them handling this ticket from start to completion? And do I have full knowledge that it's going to go the way that I can live with?
So you can kind of give that advice at the offset of what your experience and what you project could happen.
Absolutely.
Now, Steve has another really good question here. So when you're given a case, do you defend the driver and the company at the same time? How does that work? Or is there any conflict?
I certainly do. I'm one of the, there's not a lot of us that do represent carriers and drivers. I specialize in CVOR offenses, but I certainly take on many personal drivers as well, standalone. The key with drivers when it comes to the company is you have to manage the expectations of both. And most moving offenses, if not all moving offenses, have CVOR points that are usually equal to the number of demerit points, if not greater. So if a driver approaches me and it's independent of the company, and the company isn't worried about their CVOR, which they certainly should be, but if they're not, and it's just the driver I'm acting on, then I'm looking out for the driver's best interest. If I represent the company, then I work in tandem with the driver and the company to ensure that our retainer agreements, everything's in writing, line up to meet the expectations of both, and you absolutely can move forward representing the best interests of both. It's just it's a bit more of a balancing act, but one that I routinely do multiple times a day, and it's been quite successful for us. And absolutely, you can balance the company and the driver at the same time. Absolutely.
So is it financially beneficial to the carrier and the driver for you to handle both?
It is. Because they are separate lines on the docket at the court level. They are separate matters, but they're obviously related. They're drawn from the same vehicle stop or inspection station tickets that were issued from the MTO, etc. But absolutely, it's in everybody's best interest to work together and to resolve these matters, as the lifeblood of the company is vital, as is the status of the driver's license in their wallet.
Exactly, and you breed knowledge by defending the driver. So, I mean, obviously you're familiar on the case and how to defend the carrier as well. So.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay, so on your CVOR score, how does it impact profitability? I always like to point out that when you have a penalty, an infraction, a fine, these are always paid with after-tax dollars. So that $325 ticket, in essence, is much more than $325 because you are paying with after-tax dollars. Your CVOR score impacts your insurance. Your CVOR score can affect the acceptance of insurance. So therefore, I mean, right now we're in the hard market as far as insurance. And it's a constant state of review with insurance companies, the underwriters, the brokers. We're all looking at the CVOR. Why? Because it speaks volumes as to what the actions of the drivers are and the acceptance of the carrier to either tolerate or try to mitigate what the actions are of the driver. So unfortunately, a lot of times the horses out of the gates, the infractions are on the CVOR, and we have a lot of difficulties. So not only does the MTO look at the score, and once you get over that 35% threshold, also it has a dramatic effect on insurance rates, which are also paid after tax dollars. So,
which is very important to point out. I mean, it's these companies, a lot of these carriers are spending tens of thousands of dollars in fuel and tires monthly. And I think that I go to court for some beautifully run companies, and it's really something to see. And it's very important that you're pointing out these are after tax dollars, because these are companies that are very well budgeted, very well managed. And when everybody's on the same page, it really works out well and keeps insurance rates affordable, and everything works out beautifully. So.
And I think it's important too that as a carrier that you constantly review your CVOR. Why? If there's an infraction that's on there that has been incorrectly applied to your public profile, you have to remember your CVOR is a public profile. So not only is it brought in the case of insurance,
that's right,
it's brought into the case of pulling into the scale, but as well in litigation. Very important factor.
Absolutely.
The scoring is so important. The infractions carried by the drivers are important when it comes to an incident where it's now in the faces of the court.
And it's also important for hiring's sake, because a level 1 CVOR abstract is always available to a potential client that's looking to have goods moved from point A to point B. And if a carrier's level 1 abstract, which is the public version, has something that is not attributable to that company or something that they're not guilty of, but it shows up on there, it could have potential lost profits from a prospective buyer, prospective mover. And that's something to consider as well. Absolutely paramount that everybody reviews their level 2 company's CVORs monthly, because time and time again I've been called from a company saying, hey, what is this conviction that we see from April 14th? I have no knowledge of it. The company has no knowledge of it. The driver has no knowledge of it because the driver doesn't work for them. There was a problem with the plate being reported by the MTO, and it's now been attributed to their CVOR score when in fact it wasn't theirs. And there is an appeal process in place for that. So very important.
It is, and it's important that you pull it monthly because it's easier to combat a ticket as early as possible rather than 3, 4, 6, 8 months down the road.
Absolutely, and much more economical as well. If there's something that was attributable to the company, because there is times where you'll get an employee that was unaware of a policy and will pay a ticket. The sooner it is realized, is a reopening a possibility? It's the cheapest option. An appeal is possible, but it gets quite costly, effective but costly. So absolutely right. By reviewing on a monthly basis, if we get these things early on, it becomes a much better situation for all.
Now, as far as the demerit points and the CVOR, I think that we need to kind of touch base with a little bit on the maintenance issues as opposed to driver issues, and the relationship on how it can potentially affect the deterioration of the CVOR. So like maintenance issues, once they start to attack the CVOR, these are, could it be a pre-trip? Could it be something that was easily avoided? I think
that's a very common thing that ticket that I come across is an issue with the pre-trip inspection. And tickets in Ontario can be issued from 3 different streams. You can have municipal police departments such as Windsor or Orangeville, Peel Regional, Toronto Police. You have the OPP, which is the Ontario Provincial Police, which is mandated across from as south as Windsor all the way up to the northern parts. And the third option, the third stream is going to be the MTO, which is generally speaking, most of their tickets that are issued are going to be at weigh scales or inspection sites. The problem with a CVOR score that's poor is that you become flagged, and it's like a police officer behind a vehicle and they're running the plate and it comes back and the driver has 40 convictions in the last 10 years. that person is a lot more likely to receive a handful from that officer than a clean driver who we know about prior to approaching the vehicle. So absolutely, by keeping your CVOR score in check, it gives credibility at the scales. It gives credibility when an officer is checking everything that you have log-wise, paper-wise, and it also determines what level of inspection you're going to get. Because if you have a poor record, you can rest assured they're going to dig a little bit deeper and ensure that you don't have broken leaf springs or a tire that is going to need a replacement, etc. So absolutely, everything you've mentioned is vital, and these are important points to keep on.
I think it's important for the carriers to constantly, as I say, I can't stop ringing that bell that, you know, monthly, it's so important to review your CVOR. You know, there could be infractions that come in that you're not aware of, the driver hasn't told you. So yes, we're going to completely ring that bell constantly, that hold them monthly.
Absolutely.
Now, do all tickets have the potentially to negatively affect your abstracts?
They do, in the sense that if it's a conviction that can be avoided altogether, or if it's a conviction that can be amended to a much lesser charge, if there's points associated to it, and you know, a zero demerit point, a zero CVOR point alternative can be amended on the certificate, then it's advantageous for everybody. But you have to realize that when an officer gives you a ticket, you have a fighting chance. As soon as you pay it, you've lost that fighting chance. So anytime that we have a potential conviction looming, let's investigate it. Let them prove it to me that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Then we can mitigate the damage from there. But I would suggest that the best conviction is one that doesn't show up, and one is a ticket that's been withdrawn. And that happens a lot of times with my company. If you challenge tickets and you're diligent with things, you can really get a result that's far better than when you first received that ticket. It just takes time and patience.
So if I'm convicted, it obviously goes on my abstract. And is there the potential of going back and saying, can we fight this? Even though I did pay it, it was onerous of myself to pay that, or it affected the carrier. Can I go back to you and say, you know, I was charged, I want to go back and fight it?
There are options. I had one earlier this week where the driver followed the company policy and surrendered the tickets, the 3 tickets that he received in Ontario, to the carrier. The carrier mistakenly paid the wrong ticket, and it was the only one that had points on it. So at that juncture, what we have is an uninformed plea. We have a reason for reopening. It wasn't in line with the instructions of the person that received the ticket, and the ticket was paid by the manager mistakenly. So we have the option of a reopening. The reopening was granted, and now we have a fighting chance to put it back through the stream of dealing with the prosecutor and collecting the evidence and seeing what we have and delaying the matter greatly. But there are options. The second option would be appeal, and they are more expensive and a little bit trickier, but there are reasons to have an appeal granted or to attempt an appeal. And these are situational, but once the situation is laid out, it's gone over with the client. We can weigh our chances of success and make an informed decision together.
So would you recommend it based on the severity of it? So for example, if there was a 20-kilometer over speeding ticket, would it bear less weight than the severity of, let's say, 149?
Absolutely, and that would be weighed with the client at the time that it's discovered. Absolutely, there's always a chance to at least have an open discussion with the client as to what our options are, and there's times where if it's a paper infraction, we're going to let it go. It just isn't. It's not cost effective.
Yeah. Now I know that someone recently that I'm aware of had a first-time speeding ticket, and their insurance, personal insurance, just came up. There's never had an accident, never had a ticket, just had one on the 407, and it was almost $2,000 increase on their personal insurance. So
Wow.
Tickets, check with your insurance broker on your personal insurances, because it's quite important. The personal lines insurance companies don't always pull abstracts, but when they do, it could have a detrimental effect on your insurance. To the carriers, you have to be respectful of your employers. Your abstract is your resume for employment. So be aware of that. Someone
It's-
coming in for a job,
Absolutely.
having 2 and 3 lines, that carrier may not accept you and may not be in the position with their insurance provider to take you on. So we'll carry on. Do points have a bearing on insurance rates? Most definitely, most definitely. Not only points, but also the number of infractions or citations that are on your abstract. So as a professional driver, there's an acceptable level. If there's 1, that's fine. If there's 5, it's completely unacceptable. So it definitely has the infractions, the points. To have 5 points on your abstract definitely is not a tolerance within the commercial insurance. So the respectfully to the owners of the transportation firm, there's quite the brutal process that they have to go through to even substantiate that individual has to remain on, and what actions are being taken to prevent any further deterioration of their abstracts.
And I think also important to mention is it was an exceptionally bad year from about 2016 to current. There's been some terrible fatalities involving commercial motor vehicles on 400 series highways predominantly, but also other highways in Ontario. And it's kind of definitely had a sway at the court level. And I think everything is going to come down to affordable insurance rates, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in business, because if tickets were without ramification, then people would pay them. That's always your likely cheapest option. However, at the end of the day, the insurance industry will regulate what's required, and that the value of each conviction and what it potentially can do. So at very least, it's always good to at least pass it by your insurance broker or a legal practitioner like myself. Get an informed decision on things before you act.
Exactly. And so if I had a deteriorated abstract, is there any way to try to remedy that, or do I have to just live with it for the next 3 years?
Most circumstances can have an undoing, so to speak. There are options to alleviate the issues of a bad abstract. It's a matter of weighing each one on its own merits and seeing exactly what the options are. If it's a fresh matter that was mistakenly paid, or if it's a fresh matter that the officer, I've had many appeals, the officer has told the driver that there's no points on it, it won't affect their abstract, which is inaccurate information. And with those sorts of criteria in place, we do have other options. And Linda, you had passed me a client with a young person who was trying to hide the tickets from his parents and paid them inadvertently because the officer said it wouldn't have an effect. Well, he ended up with a pretty hefty suspension and was uninsurable for the most part, at least not affordably. And that was successfully undone. And it took time, but it worked out to everybody's favor in the end. So you can undo things. It's just it's a case-to-case basis that requires further elaboration.
And the financial implication is intense. And as well, in that case, there was a lot of stress put on the parents. And as well, with the individual, even though the points or the infractions have been reduced, as far as the insurance company, it's still intense as far as acceptance and premium level. So even though you might be able to combat things and bring them down, the best scenario is don't get tickets.
That would be the greatest thing.
Keep your after-tax dollars in your pocket.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then speaking of which, I mean, once we kind of get into the abstracts, and I think that we can as well relate to the insurance policy. As far as being owner operators or drivers, you may not see the impact that your record has for your carrier. Right now, in a hard market, there's many companies out there who are trying to correct the wrongs that have been done, sometimes too late. I've written many articles on this as far as, the CVOR, your accidents, your profiles, the public profiles, how important they are in the renewal process or even acceptance of risk. And as far as tickets, when you're looking at maintenance issues and at the scales, you have to understand that the carrier is so vulnerable to whether they are able to continue with the same insurance provider with the same rates, The rating right now is catapulting into a completely different category. There is not an as-is renewal rate. So there's going to be increases across the board. Don't feed the system. Protect your employer. Try to keep your maintenance issues at a minimum. Try to keep your tickets at a minimum. There are many carriers out there now who are facing facility. So, they can't protect the drivers any longer. They're accountable. So just try to help your employers. As far as your personal insurance, watch your abstracts. It is so important. And if there are severe tickets, or just, try to fight them, try to bring them down. It's in your best interest. Steve has a question here about how hiring a driver with a poor past record impact the company insurance. Most definitely. Steve, nowadays, this is at the top. This is paramount important to when you're hiring someone. If they have 5 demerit points, if they have 3 infractions, you're going to be accountable to your insurance company to why you're making that risk selection. Social media has played a huge role in bringing transportation to the light. There, on the 401 every day, we're hearing about accidents, the 400. And what we're not hearing is about the potential four-wheeler that's causing the accident. All we're hearing is about how the 18-wheelers rolled over on the 401, congesting traffic for hours on a long weekend. The brush is not nice that's being painted with. There's a story that happens before every accident, and unfortunately with transportation, we're not hearing all that is going on prior to the incident happening. So, there's a multitude of cars that are cutting trucks off. They don't realize that there is a huge metal that can't stop on a dime, and we see the aftermath. We see some of the horrific accidents. I don't know why the claims are so intense. We've had more closures, I think, on the 400 series highway than ever before.
Absolutely.
And we're not even in the winter. So, before, I've always said as well that as far as hiring drivers, if they have had an infraction causing severity of points on a carrier's abstract, it should be that the MTO say, you know what, Joel, you're moving over to carrier ABC. Well, that carrier ABC should know if they can afford to have those points applied to their CVOR. If they're leaving one carrier after deteriorating their CVOR profile, then they're going to do it again. So, yes, a long about way. Sorry about that, but a poor record is going to be costly to the carrier. A poor record is going to be costly to the driver as well. So, more so now than ever, keep the records clean. So, top items to record when you get a ticket.
Well, first off, when you're pulled over by a police officer or MTO officer, you want to remain unforgettable. Don't become argumentative. Don't have the officer write in their notebook anything that was negative to the vehicle stop. They're just there doing the job. Are they emotionally charged? Perhaps. I don't know what calls they went to before, but I can tell you as a former police officer, a lot of times when they're venting on a driver, it's not the driver that they're venting on, it's a previous call that they're dealing with. And the first thing you want to do is remain, you want to be unforgettable. You don't want this person to make a note of how you behaved or anything like that. So kill them with kindness. That's what they teach at the police college. And I tell my drivers, reciprocate that. You're duty bound to surrender your driver's license, your proof of insurance, and vehicle ownership. If you're a commercial driver, there's a whole litany of other paperwork that they're going to ask for, your logbooks, your PTI, etc. Do so and remain courteous, even if you know you're getting tickets. They have unlimited potential to love up the tickets, like the driver that received 16 last year. Don't be that guy. Just be a courteous person. And if you do receive a ticket, make notes on it. Even if the notes are simplistic, make notes contemporaneous, which means at the same time the officer's making notes contemporaneous to the event. You should do the same. Direction of travel, weather, type of vehicle you're driving. I've had several cases that have come back with the disclosure of the evidence package. And the officer's written, well, the person was driving a purple Bronco when in fact they were driving a black Durango. It was an entirely different vehicle. The officer had the wrong vehicle. That's our window of getting out of that ticket. So sometimes your notes may not seem like much at the time, but if you make them, you can be rest assured they'll make it into my file and they'll be cross-examined to what the officer provides us later on down the line. So always make notes. I'm a big fan of that. It's difficult to remember something 16 months after. Memory is seemingly more valuable as you get older and more elusive as you get older. So just make notes at the time. It kind of helps us out later down the road. And if it doesn't, no skin off anybody's back. At least we have them in the file and it's of use to us.
Community carriers, make notes in the driver's files. Make notes that you've had the discussion when they come in. Drivers, make sure that you hand in any of the tickets and make sure that your safety and compliance director is aware of everything. What we want to do as well as speak about a few things, but what to record, what to take pictures of, and as well, if there's an accident, make sure that you take pictures. Take lots of pictures. Take pictures of road signs. Take pictures of skid marks. Take pictures of the surrounding area. Do not take any pictures of blood and gore. Leave that up to
The
a
reconstruction
lawyer
officers.
and reconstruction. Exactly. Now, if you're pulled over for an accident and a police officer is issuing a citation, do you have to provide a statement to that officer? What do we have to do? What happens if I'm there and I disagree with what I'm being charged with?
Well, there's both an onus and a requirement of the officer that if they do formulate in their mind that they're going to charge you with an infraction, they do have to read you a caution. And if it's a more severe offense, they have to read your rights to counsel. You do, if you've been involved in an accident, everybody I've ever responded to accident-wise, which is dozens, hundreds, I'm sure, over my career, is rattled. If you've been involved in a vehicle collision, it's not something you were predicting that morning to happen. If you're not in a proper state of mind, simply tell the officer, I think I want to provide you a statement at a later time. My mind isn't proper right now. And that can be as a witness or that can be somebody that's eventually charged. There's no rush to say something that we might regret later on. And a lot of times I'm finding officers aren't reading caution statements the way they should. And if that's the case, I've had more than a dozen last year where I challenged things with a charter issue because the officer didn't inform the person that they do have rights once the officers formulated in their mind that they're going to charge them with an offense, that they can speak to somebody, a legal practitioner, a paralegal, or a lawyer, depending what type of charge it is. If it's a criminal charge and the officer doesn't review the rights to counsel, then that's going to have major implications later on at the court level. And it's not uncommon, but you are duty bound to cooperate and provide the information the officer is asking for in terms of documentary, your driver's license, your ownership, etc. But if you're not in the right sound state of mind, simply say, officer, I'm more than willing to cooperate, but I'd like to provide you with a statement at a later time. And most of the time they will follow up with you, and at least at that point you can reach out to a paralegal or a lawyer and find out exactly what you do have to say. And if they're charging you, then most times an officer won't even ask you. They just formulate their mindset of who they're charging before they get out of their cruiser, and the ticket's pre-written. And that helps us out later on down the road as well.
Been there, done that.
Well, we don't have to share all of our secrets on there, but sure, I understand how it goes.
No, in essence of timing, we're going to wrap up a couple, the next couple slides here, but I might put one before the other here. Should I get passengers to be witnesses at the scene of an accident?
Absolutely. Okay. You have to understand that the vast majority of the time, in my over a decade policing career, very few times does the officer actually witness the accident. So they're relying on everybody else's statement, everybody else's testimony, everybody else's version of events. So if you have passengers in your vehicle and you're certain you've done nothing wrong, because in essence, at the inside of the road, it's a he said, she said situation. Mm-hmm. And who has the more compelling evidence is really going to dictate the flow of how the case goes. So absolutely, if you have witnesses in your car that you think are of value, have them record information at the time of the events and make sure that they're well documented, and you've kept a list of that, and as well as their contact information, because they might provide good evidence later on in the court case.
And I think that we can kind of wrap up this segue with saying, if there's an accident, definitely call your insurance company. If there's an accident or an incident that involves someone, whether you're at fault or not at fault, report it to your insurance company immediately or as soon as possible. That's very important. If you're not at fault, let them know. You can always file an incident report. It's easier for them if they're contacted by a third-party company, that they're aware of the situation and can handle the situation immediately and speak to the situation with a lot of knowledge. Now, again, I'd like to thank Joel. If there's any questions, I'd like to invite them. I invite you to contact Joel. His contact information is there. Feel free to call him. Wait a sec, Steve has a question. Do they check phone history for distracted driving? Good question. I think it depends on the incident.
It does. If it's a criminal offense, you can be rest assured that we're getting warrants for your phone. In terms of distracted driving, I've never seen it at the court level. It is a charge that's going to be much more severe come January. It's going to carry 6 demerit points and a $1,000 fine. And depending if you have any previous convictions, it will also include a period of suspension, 3, 7, and 30. So it's becoming a more serious issue. Obviously, insurance companies and officers are well aware that the vast majority of rear-end accidents today are caused by distracted driving. It's becoming a major issue, and that's why the laws are reacting as such, and that's why they're becoming much more serious.
On to insurance companies, there is no defense. On cell phone and an accident, there's no defense.
There's also no alternative plea at 99% of the courts across the province. There's only one court that's still occasionally, with the right prosecutor, amending it to a lesser offense, but for the most part, if you run a trial and it's quite obvious that you were on your phone or the judge believes, the justice of the peace believes you were, the fine goes up to $1,000. So it's something to be
after tax dollars.
After tax dollars, and that's something to consider, but it's a serious offense.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions, so I think that we're fairly complete. I would like to thank everyone for joining. I really appreciate you being here, Joel.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. And if there's any questions, feel free to either stick around or get a hold of me at a later time.
Well, we have one person who, wait a second. You're quite welcome, Stacy. Thank you for joining. Take care.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.